The time is 6:16 p.m. on Wednesday, March 23rd, and I'm calling this school committee meeting to order.
It's 6:16, and I will call the select board meeting to order.
6:16, I'll call the finance committee.
Excellent. Can you hear us okay, John?
Yes.
Excellent.
Call the finance committee meeting to order.
Okay. First, before we get started, I would just like to address a couple things. They're both in relation to some things that were said at the last two recent select board meetings. The first was on the meeting of the 14th, approximately the last 5 or 10 minutes or so. And then the first 5 or so minutes of your meeting on the 21st. And it's apparent to me, based on those interactions and your board, that we have a real communication problem. And so I'm concerned about that, and I'd like to know how we can work better to do that. On the meeting of the 14th, you stated that you hadn't heard back from us and you were waiting on us. We originated this email on February 15th, and we didn't hear from anybody until March, middle of March. I could look for the exact date. And when we originally had talked about this at our last joint meeting and our last just select board and school committee meeting, we had said we wanted to have some conversations to work on the budget process. And so part of having those conversations, I think, is enabling good lines of communication. So I have emails that are not Granby extension emails. So if they're personal emails, perhaps I should be using a different email, or we should be using different emails. Mr. Libera, you read the email and responded pretty quickly on both on all of the emails. Chris did the read receipt on one of the emails, but I didn't see read receipts from any of the select board members. So I'm just wondering if there's a better way that we can establish communication. And Glenn, if we can do something better to have liaison interaction so that we can maintain that communication, I think that would be a good place to start. So with that, I think we're ready to start our conversations tonight on the budget.
Well, I mean, hang on a second. I mean, when it comes up at our select board meeting, I mean, things were brought up, and I know, like I said, at one point, Jenna was on vacation and I was away on vacation. So, and one of your emails I didn't get went into my junk mailbox, so I just never saw it, which I understand because I've gotten emails from you before that come through. So
the first email was on February 15th, and I sent it around 7:15 p.m. or something. 7:48. So I was off by half hour, 33 minutes to be exact. But no one responded to that email from the select board. And then I know that you guys were in vacation, but I believe that was the first week of March. And the meeting that I think you had February 22nd, you did talk about the joint committee, but there was never any communication that extended beyond that. And I know that, Glenn, you did say in one of your emails that it didn't, you tried to respond to me and it never sent, or it got hung up. But, you know, it's just a bit disheartening when you say things that you're waiting on us. I feel like it just puts a little bit of a derogatory tone towards the school committee when we're trying to work together. So
I didn't look at it that way. You know, when it was said, I think it was just meaning that. So I don't think there was any negativity put on it. We're just waiting for a date. That's all, because I know we couldn't, and I emailed back to you, and I think we're just waiting for the board met again to talk about it.
okay.
You have my email because I don't have anything on the 15th.
Did you get any of the other ones? Because I just kept replying to all.
I got, I think Chris forwarded me something that you sent him.
So perhaps an email could be sent and generated that has all the correct emails, because I thought that I had.
No. Okay.
Okay.
You are, however, Rick, you were on the one that she sent on the 8th.
I remember getting them before, that's why I'm going.
The 8th of March, you are on.
So Jen, you have the one from February 15th?
Mine was unread for some reason.
Maybe because you didn't read it.
It must have gotten Gary. I found it when doing a name search. So mine was unread from the 15th. The first one that I had was the one on March 8th that I replied. I was on vacation.
So we've been trying to schedule this since the beginning of February. So it's not like we just sprung something on you guys and didn't get back to you. And I just felt like I needed to defend my committee a little bit. So,
Well, all I can say is that I apologize if that's the way it came across, but by all means, that was just saying that in reference to, I think, this particular meeting that we didn't hear back.
okay.
I mean, there was no negativity on our part. We're just kind of making a statement. That's all.
But it is hard to hear that, like when you're watching your meetings and, well, what are we even meeting about? Like, we haven't heard anything, like, we haven't gotten anything. It's like, well, we've been trying to reach out, so.
I mean, in regards to our last meeting? Well, that is, it's one of our questions. What are we meeting about? I know you guys have your public presentation, I believe, next week.
So on the February 15th email that generated it, it said we wanted to talk about budget because going back to our last committee, joint committee meeting, we had said that we wanted to have more open and direct conversation about the budget, which is why we wanted to start the conversation in February to have some of those conversations. Now we're up against deadlines that we need to have our public forum, we then need to go back and do some work based on questions, then have our public hearing, and then have our vote and get stuff to the town so that we can be included with the correct warrant information the 90 days before the May 9th meeting. So that's where we're backed up against. So it wasn't about us giving you anything. It was about conversations that we had said we wanted to have. So we, I believe, just got information from the town this past week apart in-kind costs and things that we really need to be able to finish flushing out our budget. So, I don't want this to be a he said, she said kind of thing. And I know that I came out that way, but I felt the need, like I said, to defend our committee, because I think part of the reason that things go sideways sometimes is that if people only watch the select board meeting and not the school board meeting, they think that we're not responding to you, that we're not giving you what you want. We're not fulfilling some side of our bargain. And I don't want that to be the case. We want to have a good working relationship. It's what we've been trying to strive towards. So it just feels like, we've been trying to do this since the 15th. And the only information I got was after a second email, March 8th. I don't know that you were on vacation in early February. I know people are allowed to take vacations, but, accountability works both ways. So we can be accountable for not getting something for you to see, but I feel like accountability needs to go on both sides of the street.
I understand that, but also remember too, and again, things happen, but there's nothing wrong with picking up a phone and calling somebody.
Okay,
I mean, a lot of our communication really comes through Chris, because as a board, we don't communicate to each other unless we're at our select board hearing or meeting based on, because.
there's only 3 of you.
Right. So to me to, reach out to, Rick or Jen and ask about the meeting isn't proper. So
Well,
that's why I go.
I think
through-
there's a fine line there. It was explained to us, and some of that, when it's about scheduling, you can certainly reach out to your chair and have conversations because it's about scheduling.
You're right, there is a fine line, and we don't come anywhere close to that because we don't want any sign of impropriety. So we just do not communicate about select board issues at all.
So in the future, we'll do better.
Excellent, as will we.
So, to hop in, I guess really, and again, I really have one question, and this is my first time through it, and if there's things that have happened in the past or will happen in the future that I wasn't involved in, I certainly want to start fresh. And I think I want to have a good partnership and working relationship. And hopefully we can take away some of the tension that may exist in the budget process. I guess my big question, and there's probably many layers to it, are what are the expectations for the school budget from the town?
I mean, I guess as far as that is what is for what the school feels is appropriate, what they need for funding. That's where it comes from. I mean, and then after that, it goes to the, look at the finance committee, and they're gonna look at it, see what, useful for the town. Budget. I mean, it's basically what you're looking to operate the schools for the year. I mean, our input is, I don't know if we have a lot of input on it based on that, because it really comes down to what your needs are as a school department to run your schools throughout the year.
Was that where your question was going?
A little more direct on that. Should we be presenting our budget to you before we're doing a forum? Like, should you be getting it hot off the press as soon as it's ready first and then be having a forum? Do you plan on taking part in the forum? Like, where is the expectation there?
Okay, so my personal expectation is it would be nice to see some numbers when we have a discussion like this, but we are not required to see numbers at all. Like Glenn said, we don't have any part of the budget process there. That's between the finance committee and the school committee. I definitely respect and like the fact that we want to keep communication open. So if it's something that you wanted to share with the board as a, hey, this is what it's looking like, just to give you guys a heads up, that's great, but we don't have any say for you. Like, you can't say, no, you can't do that. Or, we think you should go this way or that way. That's the finance committee's job. And I don't want to pass the buck off.
No, I think that's.
But they're the ones that say it's not feasible, it is feasible, it's not.
So would FinCom then be the ones to give us the number that they want to see? And do they get that number from you guys? Like, I guess that's where the disconnect is,
So if I can try, so what we know right now is what net school requirement is. We have the in-kind from the town and we have our revenue, right? So we have those three pieces of information. So we're building with that in mind, right? So that's our starting point. And then we tried to build like a zero-based budget up from there and then take a look at that and then start making some reductions, to be honest, right off the top, because when we look at the zero-based budget that was submitted from the department heads and from the principals, that landed at a number that, right, like I can't stand here in front of people and say, yeah, this is the most financially responsible budget, right? The first draft of the budget. So we've gone through and made some reductions in there. And, are we I guess the question for us are we in the ballpark or not? And you guys can't tell us that without knowing what those numbers are, but we don't know what the ballpark is without knowing, is it just net school spending? Like, is that where we're trying to get, or is there leeway? I guess that's the question.
I think it's your budget, and then you need to present what you believe you need to run the schools for the year.
So here's a question.
Okay.
So if a government is based on a balanced budget and we put a budget together and we know just the net school spending and we have inflation and everything else, it goes above that. So what we're asking is, do we have some flexibility from the town to be able to get to a balanced budget?
That's the voters' decision.
Right.
Right, but if we're presenting it and we know we have deadlines to meet, so if we have asks, or if there are some things that are in the budget that we need to ask about, we have deadlines that we have to meet. So that's part of this process, is trying to be efficient in how we're presenting and doing things.
No, I-
Without being, I mean, because it's, someone who comes from finance, this is very stressful.
Yeah, it is.
It's extremely stressful.
It's stressful for us and I don't even have to deal with it. So I get it.
and it's just like every other town department's budget. It goes in front of the voters and the voters decide whether or not they feel that they want to fund it at the level that you're asking for. And please, for anybody in the finance committee, please speak in. When the finance committee looks at it, they look at it from a piece saying, is this something that the town can afford? Because they're looking at it and say, well, they're not gonna let the town overextend itself, if you will. They want to make sure that it's appropriate. That's how we come out sometimes where people are looking for maybe an override, or someone's looking for to remove money from free cash to cover the difference. Sometimes that happens. So that's the system how it works. I mean, I've sat many times,
Right, but wouldn't we want to know this before we present it to the town?
but that's
As
up.
communication wise.
Well, that's a communication with the finance committee. To a point, they'll tell you, yes, we feel that your budget is appropriate, or no, we feel your budget may be too much, you should look at cutting it. That's, yeah, I mean, they're looking at what, if it's financially, appropriate for the town. That's what they're doing, then they're giving their view and their opinion to the town, so the town voters know what they feel is appropriate. I mean, from us, all I have is one vote. At the
We all
town.
have only one vote.
Right,
so-
but again, if there's any way that, and if you're looking for, thoughts and ideas, I mean, great, I'd love to help out. But again, I say that, and I may repeat myself, but
So
you need
here's,
you need to put the budget out you feel like it's what you need to operate the schools.
Okay,
The
That's fair.
budget that's going to get to town meeting is what the finance committee recommends. That's the way the bylaws are set up at the moment. I mean, proposed changes, yep, the town administrator. At the moment, it's the finance committee.
right, okay.
so
I'm wondering, and this might seem like a silly question, I'm wondering if people's time is better served rather than trying to have 15 or 16 of us together here. Is it Adam and I trying to meet with Chris and John, or with John and members of the finance to talk through some of where we are? Because I'd like to have a collaborative approach, certainly, but if we're not having those conversations, and I can own some of that piece too. If we're not having those conversations, I don't know how we get to that point, right? And like I said before, I'd rather remove some of the tension from it. And I also think in the past, the school has been put in a position, and maybe not put in a position is the right way to phrase it, but it's been in a position where they didn't feel like the budget the finance committee approved was adequate. So they asked for additional money on town meeting floor, comes out of a stabilization account or wherever it does. And I think we would all agree that's not financially responsible either. So engaging in these conversations now, I hope would get us closer to that finish line rather than saying on town meeting floor, right? And I think Jen's right, like there's enough stress in this process without adding and building more tension and things with it, that I would hope to avoid some of that. I don't think we'll eliminate it all, because I understand the finance committee has a job to do as well, and as do we, right? And I think part of our job is to advocate, and Glenn is, I think, saying this, for the funding that will provide high quality education for students and support and training and resources for our teachers. And I don't think we can get there unless we're working together. So I guess I'm asking, is our time better served having smaller meetings that don't need a quorum, that don't need all these people, and try to get closer so when we're publicizing it, like some of that work has been done?
I definitely think it would be forum, definitely. I mean, I do appreciate you all together.
Yeah.
but When you have a large group, some things that need to be said don't get said, some things get overlooked, some things get said more than they need to because everybody's got their thoughts on it. So if you get the true decision makers,
Just two folders.
Yeah, and right, like nobody thinks, I don't think, nobody thinks we're sitting back and just, we haven't been doing the work on the budget at this point. So I think, right, we have a public forum on Monday, so we're moving the ball down the field as best as we can. But felt like I wasn't sure if we needed a specific number with the numbers that we have, that the numbers that we are aware of, if that's where we're at or if there was leeway. And I think what I'm hearing is maybe there's some opportunity to have conversations in a smaller setting, work through it, and then bringing it back to the committees. And I'm certainly open to that. I'm happy to meet with whoever it needs to be it Bob and Scott or Bob and John or Chris being involved. Happy to do that if that is helpful in the process. Our goal is to propose a budget to school committee that we hope gets approved on April 12th so that we're on time for a May 9th town meeting. So that gives us really about 3 weeks from yesterday. But happy to do that if people feel like that's the best path forward.
We have people here now. I mean, we can just ask people to leave and reconvene in a little bit, or we can, it seems a waste if that's the avenue that we're going to go to not capitalize on the fact that all the stakeholders are in the correct room. Are we amenable to doing something like that and, having essentially a breakout session for, half hour, 45 minutes, whatever the correct amount of time is, and then reconvening. Whoever leaves and goes somewhere fun, bring something back for me.
Kind of like got blinded here.
Oh,
What's your, Steve?
Of course.
How much has your budget going to be last year's budget? How much is the increased percentage between last year and your proposal this year?
Yeah, that's challenging right now, like where we are. I think there's still some work to do. Our goal is in the 2 to 4% range.
This would,
I just get a feeling that it's like something's holding you back or
Well-
saying why.
Yeah,
And I hear John is.
I mean,
just so we
honestly,
know.
we hear that the finance committee is going to recommend a budget, but they're waiting for us to present what our budget may be and then recommend what that number may be. Our vision, and I've been through this is my 4th or 5th time now, and it's changed every year, but like that recommendation should come early on in the process, and we're building up to that recommendation over the last 6 to 8 weeks, and now we're at March 23rd, and we're waiting for that recommended number. We've done all this work. We got to a number where we think is pretty reasonable. We still have some work to do, but we're still waiting for that recommendation. And it's late to be getting that recommendation and now trying to build into that number.
Can I respond to that one?
Yeah.
2 superintendents. That isn't one.
Oh,
That was-
3, technically
Well, three,
3.
technically,
Oh.
Yeah. We're
Well, forgetting
counting
that.
Stevens for.
Well, I'm counting Steve and Judy, and then I went to.
Is that show?
We've got Cheryl
Carol would, too.
and Carol.
What would happen is when you had your first draft budget together, they would send it to me alone. And I promised them all the time, it would not be shared because it was a first run budget. I would get a chance to look at the detail. And you and I have had conversations on detail and past budgets, okay?
Yep.
I didn't get anything this year. Last year, I got your spreadsheet, columns were locked up. I couldn't look at them. Okay. It is up to me to draft a balanced budget for the town. No. Okay. That is what it says in the budget. I will present a balanced budget to the selectmen, and also the finance. So basically, I'm the budget officer for the town. All right.
I base mine because the school is always a work in progress. Is that I turn around and I use the governor's numbers that Desi releases after he files his bill. And then I ask for the transportation, because it's usually that school spending plus transportation. Those are the numbers I use to build my budget. Okay? In the sheet that I give to the finance committee, I have school spending plus transportation. Then when I have a semi-finalized document that you guys feel comfortable with, I include that as a second column to show the difference between the schools and what I use to balance the budget. Normally in the past, and I think that was back when Henry was chair, he would put together a list of, if you don't get what you are looking for, what cuts will that entail? Teachers, programs, athletics, whatever. That would give the finance committee and myself at that point in time something to consider as part of the budget review process. I don't attend the finance committee, but I believe that's what usually ends up happening. They get the final sheets also with the details, so they can go through it and look at it like I do. I don't do it with the initial, but when I get that semi-final, I do share it with them at that time. Then usually there's a joint meeting. Last year it was Zoom. They asked some tough questions that nobody could give an answer. And now I'll be honest, nobody could give that answer.
Yeah.
Or we would get 2 or 3 different answers. Okay, and that would confuse I sometimes. Is when a question is asked, and we get 3 answers, and all 3 answers are different. Okay, that creates a problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's helpful for me because being my first time through it, and I think, I mean, we could send you our first draft budget tomorrow, first thing. You know, there's been some work done to it, but if that's how it's worked in the past, so you get that initial what was built, that we can send first thing. And I think I said earlier, we know that that's not a financially responsible budget for within the parameters of the town. We do recognize that. But we did ask the principals and department heads to build a budget based on their need, programming, staffing, those things. So that we could send off tomorrow. And then I could foresee, I don't know that I would call it the semi-final budget, but we could send another iteration of that by later Monday, because that's our plan, was to present that at a public forum Monday and then go back and tweak it anyway. So the timeline seems short, but we've been doing the work to get there anyway. So that's something that I think we could certainly agree to if that is helpful for FinCom and Chris.
But I think also what I took away too from what Chris was saying is whatever that semi-formal one is it's also including like what things, if we don't get this, would disappear, correct? And
Yep.
that's an important part that we were also missing last year.
Yep.
Specifics,
Yep.
not just.
Yep. So a couple of things. One, I know there's a lot of talk about this last year. The cells and things that were locked in that budget spreadsheet were personnel names and information that we frankly didn't think mattered
I stand for they do payroll.
in that. Okay, but it was shared with more than just you, was my, that's all I'm saying. Secondly, and most importantly, again, this is my 4th iteration, and that's the first time, and thank you, that we've actually got a clear process on how it should go. And I think some of our problem is that conversation should have taken place 6 to 8 weeks ago, and you would have had the information in a more timely manner. So thank you for laying that out, because now we know the process, and that's how it will be followed. And like Steve said, we can send you that first iteration of the budget first thing in the morning.
I have a follow-up question though too, because as you were talking, I was kind of wondering, should we be giving you the first iteration of the budget, be what it may, before we receive any kind of in-kind numbers and things like that from you as well? So we won't even necessarily have the whole picture we're accounting for, maybe the estimates. Okay,
And actually, if I remember, right, we didn't kind of down.
It did,
did.
yes.
So
Yes.
if we use the prior year, month to get a starting point
right.
to, and hopefully it goes down as shit expensive. Sometimes it'll go up, sometimes it'll.
Thank you.
And I know John had his hand up earlier.
Yeah, I want to take a little side point, first of all. I thought that every year, the compensation of every town employee and every school employee was published in the town booklet, in the town report. Is that not correct?
No, school department names aren't included in that.
Yeah,
Yes, they
yeah, they are.
Teacher names,
Mhm.
their names.
Mhm.
Yep, names and salaries.
But here's,
Okay, so it's a bit of a myth that spreadsheet contains names and shouldn't be given out to the people who are working on the finances. I don't understand that at all.
Right, so that problem's been solved. Yeah, we addressed that. We'll make sure that we share it without anything being locked. We'll make sure we'll share all the information.
And it's been a little bit troublesome that the finance committee has been given locked spreadsheets, because they're not spreadsheets if they're locked. They're basically a PDF of a spreadsheet. So I would ask you to consider handing out the unlocked version so we can trace through and see where things are coming from. Now, what I was going to say originally was that in my mind, these processes always work much smoother and much more easily if early on in the process, a small group of people get together and have discussions about it. A couple people from the school board, however many people are from the schools, a couple people from the finance committee, Chris, any selectman who wants to join. So there's no quorum of any group. And then discussions can be had about what some of the parameters are that everyone thinks should be looked at. So it may be a little bit late, but I think better late than never is still applicable. So if you can get any information out before you go off and make public comments, it would be much better, I think, for us to see this stuff ahead of time, and the earlier the better. Second thing is this, it's the context. Every year, Steve, I don't even know if you're aware of this. Every year, comments are made about the school budget in relationship to net school spending. The comments are never correct. And the reason in terms of relating them to what other towns are doing. The reason is that over 30 years ago, there was a mistake made in a report that the town of Granby sent in to the state. The report left out retired teachers' health care as an expenditure of the town, which counts towards net school spending. For virtually every other town in the Commonwealth, net school spending for the schools includes retired teachers' health care. It does not in Granby. So comparisons to other towns are worthless without either putting Granby's figures in or taking other schools out. So if you think, well, we're coming down to net school spending plus a certain amount of money, you never are. You're coming down to net school spending plus a certain amount of money plus about $500,000. And the schools have a legal right to that money because of the mistake that was made. We don't think you have a legal right to claim that you're doing what everybody else thinks of as net school spending. So I just wanted to keep that and for you to have that as part of the context for what we think when you say you're spending as little as you can spend compared to how other towns are doing. It's simply not the case.
Okay, yeah, so, right, I think what I'm hearing from you is saying, in the past, it hasn't felt like apples to apples, right? So by including the retired teachers' healthcare and those things, then we're talking apples to apples, right? If we're including those numbers, even though the state might not recognize it in that way, if in our conversations we're including that, then we're talking about the same thing, correct?
That would be the way to have the comparisons being made to what other towns are doing and spending.
Okay, okay.
I have a question. So just going through 30 years ago, if there was a mistake, is that 500,000 for how many years going forward?
That's been every year for the last, well, whatever the retired teacher's healthcare amount has been for the last 30 some odd years, has not been included in net school spending. The school gets suspended. I'm not suggesting that the school not spend that money. The school has the right to that, and unless that eventually becomes corrected. But until that point, the school has the right to spend that additional amount of money. But we think that it ought to be recognized that you're spending that additional amount of money.
But
So
we,
I have another question.
I'm honestly just a little confused as to, I think I know what you're saying, but, and Chris, I'm a director still only because you're here. So he's referring to $500,000 or so in retired teachers' benefits?
That we pay to the GIC. It's the teachers who enroll in GIC.
So, and that's not included on the in-kind sheet? Okay, okay,
No,
so
that comes through as a regular state assessment, and we do not include it on that sheet.
okay, so thank you, because I'll be honest with you, that's never been made clear to us, and I'll take some of this blame throughout the last couple of years. And John, you've always brought up that point, and I just always understood it that there's a portion on the in-kind that
There is a
was that
portion.
portion and that we were being charged for. So thank you for clarifying that. It makes it a little clearer that it's not included on the in-kind sheet.
so what, the number that we do see on the in-kind sheet is what?
Current health insurance.
So what's on the in-kind sheet is current health insurance, and then.
It says retired. It says,
Retired health insurance.
Retired employees.
And that's what that's always what I thought John was referring to when he always made that,
Those are
that
the
comparison.
employees that are retired to the Hampshire County Retirement System, not MTRS.
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay.
And what you're saying is you're paying that on our behalf, essentially, not charging it back to us. Otherwise,
Cherry sheet charge.
right, otherwise in-kind would be $500,000 or so more.
More, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Excuse me, I'm back. I apologize. My computer kicked out and just got it back. So sorry about that.
No, I think just to sum it up, I think your clarification helped Adam ask a question, and then Chris clarified where that number had come from, because we had heard that, or Adam said he had heard that before in previous joint meetings, but misunderstood it, thinking it was charged back through the in-kind. But that's been clarified. So thank you. And I appreciate what John said, and I think, this being my first time through it, I'm going to learn some things about the process. And one big takeaway, and I guess I suggested it in some way, but John's reiterating it, is starting this conversation with a small group, have some of these discussions early on. And, again, I need to take some responsibility that I waited. I think I waited to hear some guidance, and I should have reached out. And when Chris and I have spoken, he's always said, if you have the questions, reach out. I didn't want to bother him about something that I thought was coming anyway. And now I have some clarity around that. So, I think you'll hear from me much sooner in FY24. I know, we got ways to get through this one, but.
so should we try to do some of those breakout conversations, since we have most of the, or all of the stakeholders here, just how we want to divvy it up? And we can reconvene, or we can, it's being recorded anyway, because it has to, because it's an open meeting, but I don't know, I just feel like rather than just sit here and essentially kibitz, should we take advantage of having these small group conversations, and we can either reconvene in an hour, 45 minutes, a half hour, whatever we think is the appropriate amount of time, and report back out, or just let those that are not staying go, and we can communicate with our respective committees after. I'm not really sure, but I feel like, it makes sense to me to try to move forward since we have the people here. It seems like everyone's agreeable. I just need to know are we gonna do it for a small amount of time? Do we, how do we want to work this and take advantage of the fact that we've had this on our calendars and can kind of move forward?
We're all here.
I-
Move forward, we need to.
Yeah, I guess my thing with that is Chris and the finance committee haven't seen anything and it's.
Yeah.
And not all the school committee members have all the details. So when we start splitting up, are those conversations productive?
Or do you want to just have it be the finance budget subcommittee and then a couple of members from finance and only one of you?
I mean, honestly, I would say this, I think our best plan would be to get Chris the budget first thing in the morning and let him review it. And maybe try to get something together after that, instead of us meeting and kind of putting everyone on the spot and reviewing it in real time. I feel like we'd all be at a disadvantage if that was the case, but that's just my view.
I agree with that.
It's not realistically possible for the finance committee to comment without seeing something ahead of time. I mean, we're not going to come to a big meeting and see something for the first time and comment.
Yeah, understood.
I was just thinking to be able to have some of those conversations, it seemed, but I'm in the minority. So with that, do we close it up then?
I think, be a good point for finance committee, the school committee and the select board. Good time to decide what each committee or board needs from each other. So everybody knows leaving this meeting with what they need. I mean, we're all here together, so let's speak up what you believe, what the finance committee may need, what Chris may need, what you may need in return. I think it's a good point to.
So if we're sending out in the morning, the budget, just the first, I think our subcommittee, finance subcommittee, Chris and the school subcommittee we should have another conversation based on how we feel about this budget. Because, as it stands right now, nobody's seen it. We haven't had an effective conversation about it. And you guys haven't seen it.
My preference would be to adjourn this meeting now and then have a couple people from the finance committee stay, a couple people from the school committee stay, Chris stay, one of the select board members stay if they want to, Steve, Adam stay, and work out those details of what each group thinks they want to see and how they want to see it.
Technical question. Is it possible to have John available this way? Would it not being broadcast?
Yes.
Yeah, you mean just via Zoom? If we got in a smaller meeting, just via Zoom, yeah, certainly.
So it wasn't
Yeah,
live,
yeah,
yes.
certainly. Yep.
I'm fine with that. That way we can install our game plan going forward.
Great.
I'll second. All those in favor of adjourning school committee? Aye.
Okay, let's adjourn the finance committee meeting.
Second.
Thank you. Okay.
Select board is adjourned.